When you think of Scotland, you might picture bagpipes, castles, or maybe that unmistakable Highland charm. But along with that charm comes a legacy of resilience, inventiveness, and a famously sharp wit. Traits that have helped this small nation punch far above its weight in shaping the modern world. Their innovations have brought us closer together, protected our skies, and revolutionised medicine. So here are 5 amazing scientific breakthroughs from Scotland that have changed life for all of us. And I'll start with an invention that has connected us like never before. Alexander Graham Bell was born in Edinburgh in 1847 into a family obsessed with sound and speech. His grandfather taught elocution, and his father developed a system to help deaf people speak. So communication literally ran in the family, and Bell became obsessed with a bold idea. Could the human voice be transmitted electronically? He wasn't alone. Several inventors were racing towards the same goal. But in 1876, Bell filed his patent first, just hours ahead of rival inventor Elisha Gray. Bell understood that sound is vibration. Speaking into a mouthpiece caused the diaphragm to vibrate, creating tiny electrical currents that travelled along a wire. At the other end, those currents recreated the same vibrations and the same voice. Just 3 days after filing his patent, Bell made the first successful transmission of intelligible speech. But many dismissed his telephone as a novelty. Why talk when a telegraph would do? But within a decade, telephone lines crisscrossed cities, and by the 20th century, they spanned continents. Bell showed us how to send voices over wires, but another Scot would show us the very forces that make all of our modern communications possible. In the 1860s, James Clerk Maxwell of Edinburgh published a set of 4 mathematical equations. To many of his peers, they looked like theoretical gibberish, elegant symbols with no clear purpose. But hidden inside was a revolution that no one could have imagined. You see, each equation was a mathematical description of something observed in the real world. And I'm going to tell you exactly what they mean. Maxwell's first equation can be seen when you pull your clothes fresh out of the dryer and they cling together. That's electric fields at work, invisible forces reaching out and pulling things together. This observation first came from Gauss, who had shown that electric charges create electric fields. You can picture this as invisible arrows radiating out from a positive charge or pointing inwards towards a negative one. The second was that magnetic poles always come in pairs. If you split a magnet, the 2 new magnets will each have a north and south pole. No matter how small you cut them, you'll never get just a north or just a south pole. Would you like to know how power plants work? Well, that's explained by Maxwell's third equation, which says that a changing magnetic field creates an electric field. So when you move a magnet through a coil of wire, it creates electricity. And in the case of power plants, lots of it. The fourth came from Ampere's work, who discovered that an electric current surrounds itself with a magnetic field. That's the principle behind electromagnets and, you got it, electric motors. But there was a problem. All 4 equations by themselves were fine until you put them together. Then Maxwell realized that there was something missing, and that missing piece appeared in the final equation. Maxwell saw, purely from the math, that Ampere's law, as written, was incomplete. Maxwell added a new term that said that a changing electric field must also create a magnetic field. That insight unlocked something extraordinary. It meant that electricity and magnetism could sustain each other, rippling through space as electromagnetic waves. This brought him to his final stunning conclusion, that visible light was also an electromagnetic wave. It meant that the warmth of sunlight, the colours of the rainbow, and the beam from a lantern weren't some separate mystery of nature. They were part of the very same family of electricity and magnetism. In one stroke, Maxwell had united optics with electromagnetism, showing that light itself was just a tiny slice of a much larger spectrum of invisible waves. Radio, microwaves, X-rays, and beyond. That conclusion was destined to change our planet. It was part of a future that Maxwell would never see. He died of stomach cancer in 1879. 8 years after his death, Heinrich Hertz discovered radio waves, unleashing the communications age. Maxwell revealed the invisible waves that fill our world. Decades later, those same waves would help defend a nation in its darkest hour. In the 1930s, Britain was worried. Rumours were flying that Germany might be developing a terrifying new weapon, a death ray capable of zapping aircraft out of the sky. So the Air Ministry turned to Scottish radio expert Sir Robert Watson-Watt and asked the big question: can we build one of these? Watson-Watt and his assistant Arnold Wilkins ran the numbers and gave his verdict: absolutely not. The power required would be off the charts. But in the process he realised something far more useful. Radio waves could bounce off planes and reveal their position long before they were visible. That idea became radar. In 1935, Watson-Watt had demonstrated it successfully, and within a few years, Britain had built the chain-home radar network along its coasts. When the Battle of Britain came, radar gave the Royal Air Force precious minutes of warning, enough time to scramble fighters from multiple airfields, making the Germans believe that Britain's Air Force was much larger than it actually was. And it changed the course of the war. Watson-Watt didn't give Britain a death ray, but what it gave them was something far more important: the ability to see the enemy before the enemy saw them. In a sense, the Battle of Britain was over before it had even started. Today, radar is everywhere, guiding aircraft through storms, tracking hurricanes, helping ships navigate, and even tucked inside modern cars to power collision avoidance systems. But Scotland's genius didn't end with machines and mathematics. It also transformed medicine, starting with how we face the surgeon's knife. In 1847, Dr. James Young Simpson of Edinburgh made a discovery that forever changed medicine: chloroform as an anaesthetic. Before Simpson, surgery was more like a horror show. Patients were awake, screaming and strapped down while surgeons raced against the clock. Survival was uncertain and trauma guaranteed. Simpson, always an experimenter, tested different chemicals on himself and his friends. One evening, after inhaling chloroform at his dinner table, he and his colleagues passed out cold. When they woke up, they realised they had found a way to painlessly knock out people. Soon, chloroform was being used in operating rooms and even famously by Queen Victoria during the birth of her 8th child. Apparently, the Victorian idea of a little suffering builds character didn't apply to the Queen. From then on, going under became an essential part of surgery. Today, anaesthesia is so routine we barely even think about it. From a quick trip to the dentist to open heart surgery, it's the reason patients go in terrified and wake up asking, is it over yet? From easing the pain of surgery, Scotland would go on to deliver one of the most important medical discoveries of all time. In 1928, Scottish scientist Alexander Fleming came back from a summer holiday. On his bench were a few petri dishes he'd left behind. Nothing unusual, well, not for Fleming at least, just some bacterial cultures. But something strange had happened while he was away. One dish had become contaminated with a mould, and instead of just spreading everywhere, the mould had created a clear halo around itself where the bacteria had been wiped out. Most people would have sighed, tossed out the dish and started over. But Fleming was curious. He recognised that the mould was releasing a substance that killed harmful bacteria without harming human cells. It was a kind of happy accident that only a sharp mind could turn into history. At first, the medical community did not grasp its importance. The mould was tricky to produce in large amounts, and Fleming was not a businessman. But in the 1940s, two Oxford researchers figured out how to mass-produce penicillin. By World War II, it was saving countless soldiers from infected wounds and pneumonia. Today, antibiotics are so common we almost take them for granted, from treating strep throat to making routine surgeries safe. And it all began with a messy dish and a curious Scotsman, which makes me feel a little bit better about the state of my fridge. From the battlefield hospital to the operating room, from the first crackling phone call to the invisible waves that carry your Wi-Fi, Scotland's spirit of invention is woven into the fabric of modern day life. If you want to learn more about some of these inventions and discoveries from Scotland, please check out the links at the end of this video. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next episode of How the World Was Changed.